Chapter 49. Luli. Once she was alone, Luli raised the dagger and murmured, "Kadir?" There was no response. In the ruins he had returned for her. He had been smoke and fire and shadow, but he'd been alive. Now even his reflection was gone. "You sank ruins to save me." She rubbed furiously at her cheeks, despising her tears, but unable to stop them from falling. And now what? You're just going to fade away? I thought you were stronger than that." The tears came quicker, shaking her body and making her vision blur. "You are the weak one," said a small voice inside her head. And it was that confession, that truth, that finally broke her. All these years she'd been trying to distance herself from her past failures. Layla had been too young and helpless to save everyone she loved. But as Luli, she'd vowed to become stronger, wiser, someone who, unbeholden to anyone, would be able to rescue herself without worrying about losing others. But she had failed to save both herself and Kadir. She did not know how long she'd sat there crying, only that by the time her tears had dried, the prince and the thief had not returned. She didn't care. The emptiness was a chasm inside her, and it grew deeper and deeper until it swallowed her whole, pulling her into a dismal, fragmented sleep. When the nightmares continued to wake her, she gave up on slumber and decided to search for the missing prince and thief. She moved to stand and cried out when excruciating pain shot through her ankles. Her legs, she had forgotten. She looked up at the sound of footsteps. They were soft, so faint she could barely hear them. She saw a hazy shape, a man-shaped shadow. She squinted. "Prince?" The man stepped forward, and in the flickering firelight she saw it was not Prince Mazen. No, this man was badly burned and wounded and barely standing upright. Her heartbeat tripped. "No, but you're dead." She scrambled back, only to find herself up against the cave wall, legs quivering with pain. The man she had burned, the man she had killed, drew closer, knife raised. "If I must die," Imad rasped, "I shall take you with me." He lunged. Luli screamed as a hand came down on her shoulder. She gasped and tried to wiggle away. "No!" The word was a plea, a prayer. "No, no." "Luli, you're dreaming." The voice was so soft it was barely audible, and yet it washed over her like a soothing wave, smoothing the edges of her panic. She eased her eyes open. Red-eyed shadow sat before her. Another blink, and the shadow became a solid man with umber skin and faded tattoos. She focused on his eyes, soft and brown and human. "You were making a face in your sleep," Kadir said. "I thought it rude to keep staring." Luli threw herself at him with a choked sob. Pain lanced through her ankles, but in that moment the injury did not matter. She waited for Kadir to dissipate into smoke. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her and pulled her to him. He didn't say anything, just sat there quietly as she cried into his shoulder. For a time, they stayed like that, the silence broken only by her hiccups and when she had quieted the crackle of the campfire. There was silence, soft and comfortable. Eventually, Luli pulled away to look at his face. He looked perfectly human. She reached out to touch his cheek, perfectly solid. His expression softened. "You were dreaming, so I woke you." Luli stared at him, daring the planes of his face to crumble to dust. But he remained. "You died," she said at last, voice hoarse. She did not realize she had pulled away until Kadir reached out to set his hand atop hers. "Never dead. Incapacitated, but not dead. I am sorry it took me so long to find you." "But the trap, enough to wound me, slow me down." "You were smoke." It is no simple thing, reforming a body so badly damaged. Luli swallowed. "But the swords were made of iron." Kadir scoffed. "What do you think I am?" Imad's words wafted through her mind like a poisonous smoke. "It's no wonder he lives. Do you know what he is, girl?" "I don't know." She could barely say the words over the knot in her throat. A tangled web of memories unfurled in her mind. Kadir confessing he could not return home. Imad speaking of a relic so valuable any who saw it were ordered dead, a Jinn King's relic. She remembered the hunger in his eyes as the ruins collapsed, the way his voice had trembled as he approached her and Kadir. "You, it was you we were looking for." Her mother had told her stories about the 7 Jinn Kings who had power enough to sink their world. Ifrit, Kadir called them. But that was a word for terrible fearsome jinn, for the creatures that had revived Aisha with twisted dark magic, for legendary jinn in the lamp, not Kadir. She pulled her hand away. Kadir's eyes dimmed. Luli. He looked as if he were about to reach for her again when he turned, eyes narrowed. Aisha bint Luas leaned against the cave entrance, arm folded over her chest, one ankle crossed over the other as she surveyed them with a cat-like smile Luli knew was not her own. The look made her heart thud nervously. She had barely trusted the thief when she was just herself. Now that she was hosting a deadly jinn, she trusted her even less. But Kadir seemed unconcerned. "I see you made your deal." Aisha clicked her tongue. "You is not my name. Can you say Aisha?" My gods. These words were spoken by Prince Mazen, who stepped into the cave, holding a bloody hare by its feet. He stared between them bug-eyed. "How are you alive?" Kadir frowned. "Who's asking? Prince Mazen, or is this another disguise?" The prince at least had the decency to blush. Luli wanted to punch his embarrassed face. For so long her anger at him had been muted by her grief. But now it was back, sparking inside of her like an unruly flame. The first time he had lied about his identity, she had sympathized with his plight. Evidently, that meant nothing to him. Aisha scoffed. "How delightful that we've all been keeping secrets." She grabbed the hare from Mazen, strode over to the fire, and began to skin it with some shard she'd apparently acquired in the desert. "Perhaps we should have a heart-to-heart." No one spoke into the silence that followed. Luli knew she should try to take charge. She was the midnight merchant, after all. She was useless. The realization hit again, so hard it made her shudder. It was true. What was she without her relics, without Kadir? It was Kadir who at last broke the silence, not with a word, but with a sigh that made the fire in front of them waver. "Fine." He gestured, and the campfire rose, twisting and stretching until it morphed into a marvelous landscape of shining minarets and domed buildings. "Let us speak of lies and truths, and of the story hidden between them." And so he told them the tale of the 7 Jinn kings, but his version was different from the human tale. In Kadir's story, the Jinn kings were not a nameless group of villains. They were a collective of Jinn so powerful they were given their own name. Ifrit, beings of fire whose magic so defied the natural order it was feared even amongst Jinn. He swept his fingers through the fiery mirage of the city, and it reformed beneath his fingers, separating into 7 figures. The Ifrit were different from normal Jinn in that they could learn multiple magics, not just the one they were born with. They were named, however, for the affinity they specialized in. He reached for the nearest fiery silhouette and altered its shape, morphing it into a large, flaming bird with many tails. "The shapeshifter," Kadir said. He touched the second figure, which hopped and spun through the air. "The dancer." The third figure perched itself on a flying rug and held up a skull. "The resurrectionist." Luli glanced at Aisha, who caught her gaze and looked away, brow furrowed. "So you are the Queen of Dunes," the prince mumbled. "Stop calling me that," Aisha said sharply. "The Jinn may speak through me, but only when I grant her permission. I am still myself." Kadir pointedly cleared his throat as he reached for the fourth figure, which swam through the air with angled limbs. "The Tidebringer," he said. The fifth figure clasped its hands in prayer. "The Mystic." The sixth figure pressed its hands to the ground. Flaming trees shot up in a circle around its hunched form. "The Wanderer." Then Kadir drew his fingers through the last form. He crafted a turban made of smoke for its head and a cloak of blue fire for its back. The figure strode around their campfire like a sentinel, its blue cape billowing soundlessly on a non-existent wind. "The Inferno," he said softly. The prince made a sound of awe. Luli said nothing. She felt Kadir's gaze on her. She knew what the look on his face would convey, even without seeing it. "I am sorry I never told you." A storm of emotions rose inside of her, a thicket so thorny she could barely discern one virulent feeling from another. Every time she tried to focus, her concentration fractured and she remembered the pain in her legs. She had never felt so broken before. so bone deep tired. When she said nothing, Kadir returned his gaze to the fire. He shaped it once more, this time into 8 forms. He set one on a throne and had the others kneel before it. The Ifrit served a king who ruled from his throne in Dahab. They were both his warriors and his advisers, and were sworn to protect their country. For hundreds of years there was peace. He stared for a long time at the flickering image of the bowed jinn. Then he sighed, and the fire lost its shape. Luli was startled to see beads of ash on his face. His chest rattled every time he breathed. It was no simple thing reforming a body so badly damaged. In the legends, the prince paused, color coming into his cheeks, as if he were aware of how strange it was to refer to history as myth. In the legends, the 7 kings brought the wrath of the gods down on them. They buried the jinn world beneath the sand sea. Aisha laughed, a soft chuckle that seemed misplaced coming from her slanted lips. Gods? There were no gods, only you humans. Even Luli looked up at this, but Aisha, or the resurrectionist, whoever the hell she was in that moment, only stared forlornly into the fire. One day, humans came to our lands. We thought them harmless creatures, an incompetent, magicless people. Our king was curious, so he welcomed them into our city. It was ill-advised, Kadir murmured. He spoke lightly as if he'd lost the strength to project his voice. When they found out our blood could heal and that our relics could be wielded as weapons, they came after us with iron swords and spears. They were relentless, Aisha said. We could not destroy all of them, so Kadir turned away. We ran from them. We disobeyed our king and buried our country deep beneath the sand so that no human could ever reach us. The weight of those words settled slowly. To sink a landscape of ruins was one thing. To make an entire country disappear was another. Luli crossed her arms and swallowed. She imagined falling forever, imagined her home and her loved ones suffocating beneath the sand. They made us suffer for our betrayal, Kadir muttered. Luli glanced at the faded scars running up his arms. My shame was carved into me with a knife so that I would not forget it. I deserved it. Those of us who didn't want to suffer fled to the human world, Aisha said. She held up the hairless rabbit and after a significant pause threw it into the fire. The prince made a sound of protest that quickly collapsed into a gasp, for the fire did not burn the hair, it cooked it. Of course, all of us suffered in the end. A sullen but short-lived quiet permeated the cave before the prince cleared his throat and said, In our legends, they call you the Queen of Dunes. They say, Enough. Aisha's voice was sharp, cold. I tire of these jinn stories. The prince blinked, looking thoroughly perplexed. He turned that look on Kadir, who shook his head. My past is my past. I buried it long ago, and I intend to keep it that way. He glanced up and caught Luli's eyes. Forgive me. There was nothing to forgive him for. This was not Kadir's fault, and yet she could not stop reliving the moment Imad had apprehended them in the ruins. It was you we were looking for, he'd said. Not the compass, not a relic. The thieves had unknowingly been searching for an Ifrit, a creature that had stumbled into her tribe's burning campsite that night, looking for his compass, and who had found it in the hands of a tortured girl. It had been the thieves who killed her family. Kadir had saved her from them. And yet, if Kadir had not been wandering by their campsite in the first place, if the thieves had not tracked him to that area, they would still be alive. The realization opened a gaping hole in her heart. It didn't matter that it was irrational. Her memories were a stronger force, pushing away everything until there was nothing but a deep anguish, one that ought to have been extinguished with Imad. But the flame had not gone out. It smoldered somewhere inside her, screaming, What if, what if? Luli, Kadir said softly. I've heard enough for the night. She felt hollow, drained. We'll speak more tomorrow. Her words had the finality of an executioner's axe. The quiet persisted into their half-hearted meal. Later, the prince and Aisha took their conversation outside, leaving her alone with Kadir. Neither of them spoke, not until Luli was ready to sleep and Kadir reached out and touched her shoulder as she was limping away. I apologize, he said. It was selfish of me to only ever want to be Kadir in your eyes. Gently, he squeezed her shoulder. Thank you for fighting so hard to reclaim my dagger in the ruins. He exhaled softly, then slid his hand off her shoulder. I managed to save this as well. He tapped something at his hip, a familiar scuffed up scabbard. Lily's heart jumped into her throat at the sight of it. Imad had not mentioned the blade when his ghouls investigated the hole. As he always did, Kadir read the question in her expression. I hid the blade in the desert before I infiltrated the ruins. He shook his head. You have taken care of my dagger all these years. It is only natural I would protect a gift from you in the same way. Lily had no words. Even if she had, she would not have been able to speak, tight as her throat was. She said nothing when Kadir offered her a feeble smile and said, Tomorrow, when I have regained more of my power, let me heal your injuries. All she managed was a nod before she turned away, eyes burning with unshed tears. When she did finally sleep, her rest was plagued by nightmares.